Friends, I congratulate you because you have finished up this central section of law in Deuteronomy. You reached the finish line. But before we turn the page, I really want to challenge us to take a moment to reflect on what we learned here in the law. I think it would be really easy and frankly quite tempting for us to just skate on by, to think, phew, thank goodness I made it through that, and try and put this out of our minds. But our purpose here in Deuteronomy is and always has been to learn more about who God is and what he wants for us. And I think that it's important for us to reflect on what we learned about those two things in the law. What did we learn about who God is, and what did we learn about what he wants for us? And I think that this section from 1 John will help us do that today. So I'm going to read a few verses starting in verse 7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. And this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he has loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. That phrase, God is love, is so famous. But have you ever stopped to take a second to reflect on what that actually means? God is love. I think that means that love is essential to God's nature. It is essential to who he is. God would not be who he is if he were not loving. And I think it means that everything God does and everything he says and everything he commands, every way that he relates to us is loving because he can't help it. Love is a constant state of being for him. He cannot not love us in everything he does. Have you ever been around somebody, maybe it's a friend or a family member or a congregant here at HPUMC, who is full of so much goodness and light and generosity and kindness that when you are around them, you cannot help but be different. Just being around them calls you to a higher standard. You start using kinder words and smiling at strangers and complimenting your barista at your coffee shop. I can think of a few of you who are like that for me. And people like that in our lives are an excellent image, but still just an image of what God is. Everything he does and says is loving. And if that's true, that means that everything he says, everything he commands in Deuteronomy is loving. And so here's my question for you. Where did you see his love in these laws? How did his love rub off on you by reading these laws? I'll give you a few examples of my own. I saw his love in the way that he drew nearer to the weak and the vulnerable and the marginalized over and over and over again. And I've gotten the privilege to talk to you about it over and over again. It is a drumbeat of Deuteronomy. I've seen his love that way. I've seen his love in the way that he draws boundaries around the way we're supposed to relate to each other. What's okay and what's not okay, because he knows the ways that we hurt each other. And so he gives us loving rules to protect us from hurting one another and getting hurt ourselves. I see his love in the way that he creates commands that protect and honor the sanctity of human life. that he cares about justice, that he cares about the way we honor those who have passed away, that he wants us to guard against violence and bloodshed, because every life, including yours and mine, is so infinitely precious to him, so sacred to him, that it matters how we honor and protect one another's lives. I see his love that way. How have you seen his love? How has it rubbed off on you? This is one of those moments where I really wish I could be with you where you are, in your kitchen or your living room or on your back porch, and hear what you're thinking. What have you learned about God's love? This makes me so grateful for the law. And I know that might sound like a funny thing or a crazy thing that only a biblical nerd would say, but I really do mean it. I'm grateful that we have all of these laws to meditate on. Because if we really take Jesus at his word when he says that all of God's commands boil down to this: love God and love one another. I don't know about you, but that is very easy for me to leave as some sort of like lofty, aspirational ideal. Not that I don't cherish and treasure those words, but just that feels so enormous and so all-encompassing that this is supposed to guide my whole life, that sometimes I don't know what that looks like in my everyday. And that's why I am so grateful that our loving God comes so close and gets so practical with us, that he would show us through these laws what love for him and love for neighbor looks like as an enacted, embodied reality. That it wouldn't just be some idea that we have to flesh out on our own, but he would take the trouble to tell us, what does it look like in my everyday as I eat and drink and interact with my coworkers and my family and engage in commerce, right? And what does it look like in the bad moments when we hurt each other, and in the ugly moments when tragedies strike? I'm really grateful. Because though these laws require us to meditate and discern what they mean in our culture, there is so much value in searching for God's wisdom there. And so I hope that you leave feeling like you have learned more about what it looks like in your everyday life to love God and love one another. You are the beloved of God. He cherishes you so much that he wants to transform you into his image, to make you more and more loving like he is. And living that out is something that will take all of our lives. In both senses, all of the time that we have and our whole lives, every part of our lives. And so, friends, may the Spirit of God be with you. May he encourage your heart and guide you as you discern what that looks like for you. Take care, friends.